moments ago, the New York Times posting a blockbuster report. Michael Cohen, the president's longtime personal attorney and fixer, secretly taped then candidate Donald Trump in September 2016, talking about a hush money payment to a Playboy model who says she had an affair with the now president of the United States. Sources say the FBI seized this tape in a raid on Michael Cohen's office earlier this year. Maggie Haberman of the New York Times joins me on the phone. She's part of the team that broke this story. Maggie, it is a remarkable story. Give us the biggest elements here, the biggest questions now for the president.
Sure. The biggest, and thanks for having me on, John. The biggest question right now for the president is why the campaign said that they had no knowledge of this when they were asked about it late in the fall of 2016. The biggest thing we learned from this is that there is a brief recording of Michael Cohen talking to Donald Trump. Michael Cohen was at that time Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Donald Trump was not the president yet, and they are discussing some details related to payments by AMI, which owns National Enquirer, to Karen McDougal, a woman who had alleged that she had had an affair with then not candidate yet Donald Trump. And this conversation had something to do with making an additional payment from Mr. Trump to Karen McDougal. His lawyer, Giuliani, told us that he had on the recording apparently instructed that it be done by check so that it was done properly as opposed to cash. That payment, we understand, was not made. But obviously this is going to raise all sorts of questions, again, about why it is that the campaign would claim they knew nothing about this when clearly Donald Trump knew very well about it before the Wall Street Journal made it public.
An excellent point there, and that, as we piece together what the president or then candidate businessman Donald Trump has said about this, we'll do all that throughout the hour. But to your point there, I'm reading the Rudy Giuliani quote in your article. He says, in the big scheme of things, it's powerful exculpatory evidence. Rudy Giuliani is both a lawyer, but he's also helps the president spin these things. How so? How does he believe it's exculpatory, not incredibly damning?
They're trying to argue that basically that the president learned about the AMI deal after the fact, that it was several weeks later, and that he wasn't trying to hide anything. If it was done by check, a check could be subpoenaed, a check could be requisitioned, that it was not cash, so therefore he's afraid of this being learned of. It's walking a bit of a fine line there, as you correctly note. We will see what else the president has to say about this as time goes on.
Maggie Haberman of the New York Times breaking that news. Maggie, appreciate your time at this busy time. With me here in studio to share their reporting and their insights, Julie Hirschfeld-Davis, also with the New York Times, CNN's MJ Lee, Lisa Lerer with the Associated Press, and CNN's Caitlin Collins. And for our audience members who might be unfamiliar with this or might be confused, because there's the separate issue of Michael Cohen's involvement in the Stormy Daniels payment. This is separate to this. Karen McDougal, a former Playboy model, she alleges she had a nearly year-long affair with Mr. Trump, not president at the time. This is in 2006, shortly after Melania gave birth to Barron Trump. She sold her story to the National Enquirer, and they never published it. And the whole theory behind that is that the publisher of the National Enquirer is a friend of the president and the so-called catch and kill. They get the information exclusively, then they don't publish it. We were talking about this before the program, reading this headline, Michael Cohen secretly taped Trump discussing payment to Playboy model. In any other universe, just reading that is incredibly damning to the President of the United States, but we have learned in this universe sometimes up is down and east is west. Well, what to make of this?
I think if we had reason to be skeptical about Donald Trump's denials in the past, the White House's denials in the past about these various stories that the White House may have tried to kill, these affairs that a number of women have said they had with Donald Trump some years ago, I think we now have reason to be 100 times more skeptical. Right. No matter what Donald Trump says now going forward, no matter what White House spokespeople say now going forward about these stories, well, here we have the first example of a recording that was made in which Michael Cohen and Donald Trump explicitly discussed the possibility of a payment to a woman who claims to have had an affair with Donald Trump. I think it is really worth emphasizing, though, in this New York Times story, it does say that payment was ultimately never made. That's attributed to Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's lawyer. So the payment that was made, which this shouldn't be confused with, was the payment from AMI to Karen McDougal of $150,000. Now, I'm unclear on sort of the timing of whether that payment was first made and then this discussion happened, or if this discussion happened and then they decided not to make the payment, Donald Trump or Michael Cohen, to Karen McDougal, and then the AMI payment happened.
And Michael Cohen's new attorney, Lanny Cohen, a veteran Washington damage control attorney, says they'll have no comment on this story. But you make a key point. And in both of these cases, the Stormy Daniels payment, which is not what the story's about, and this payment, this conversation, the first payment to Karen McDougal had been made. This conversation between Michael Cohen and then Republican nominee for president, Donald Trump, he's not president yet, 2 months before the presidential election. So the timing is immediately suspect as well. The president's longtime fixer, the man who makes problems go away, is talking on the phone to Donald Trump, somehow felt the need to secretly record the conversation with Donald Trump about a potential payment never made, potential hush money payment to a Playboy model who says she had an affair with the president.
Yeah, I'm starting to sense a pattern here of the White House denying all of these things, because for months they denied the Stormy Daniels thing, the president had any idea about it, and then Rudy Giuliani confirms that, oh, the president did know about it and he did make that payment, and that is exactly what happened with Karen McDougal. In the past, they've denied that the president had an affair with this Playboy model, and now we're seeing this come out, and Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, is on the record here trying to say that it is a good thing that the president was trying to pay the Playboy model to silence her for having an affair with him through a check rather than sending cash, so it could be properly documented. That defense is, I don't even know the word for it, but we have that there. And then also the thing to keep in mind here is that we've reported in the past, Michael Cohen had a habit of recording his conversations with people to keep records of them. So we have this 1 2-minute tape that they're downplaying because it's only 2 minutes of him and the president discussing this. But also the question is, how many other tapes are there? And that is what people who even work in the White House have raised the question of, if there are women like Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, how many other women are there out there like that with similar stories?
Right, and as Michael Cohen gets asked questions about, in this case, apparently a non-payment. In the Stormy Daniels case, there was a payment, and the president reimbursed him for that. And so there are going to be all sorts of questions about, were campaign finance laws violated? Was all of this reported properly on everybody's taxes? If the money came from the Trump organization, is it reported right in the business records? And so this is the big question about Michael Cohen's legal jeopardy and the spillover effect on the president. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Oh, and right. And the fact that he had a secret tape seems like a huge piece of this whole thing, as you were saying. I mean, what else is he recording? What other tapes are there? It seems pretty clear that the prosecutors are going to find these tapes, and that could open up a whole other world of, you know, charges and investigations that we don't even know about, with the president's voice recorded. That seems like very strong.
It's a great point, because we know the materials were seized in a highly unusual raid. Prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, Robert Mueller had a clue about this case, and Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, said, this is not your department. Took the information that he had over to the Southern District of New York, gave it to other federal prosecutors. They got a judge's warrant for a no-knock warrant on an attorney. That's a big deal. You have to present a high bar of evidence that you're worried that person is going to destroy evidence, hide evidence, cheat, and lie to you. A no-knock warrant on Michael Cohen's offices and the hotel where he was staying at the time, because his apartment was under renovation, to seize these materials. They have been in the hands of a special master, a former federal judge, if my memory is correct, or a federal prosecutor, who has decided what is privileged and what is not, and they're going back through this. And in the process of that, this was turned over. Rudy Giuliani knows about this, because as they found it, they turned it over to the president's attorneys. What else?
This is the question, is how many other recordings are there, and how many other records are there, whether they're recordings or other kinds of records, emails, transcripts, whatever, what have you, that not only shed additional light on this case, but might shed additional light on the Stormy Daniels case and other women and possible business deals that might be, you know, an issue for the president. I mean, it is striking, as you said earlier, that we're not talking at all about the fact that, you know, there is a recording of the President of the United States discussing with his personal lawyer payments that are being made to a Playboy model to silence her about an affair that he had. That's like baked in the cake at this point. And politically, that obviously is not where the White House is focusing. Where they do have to be focused is what happens in the months intervening between when this payment is talked about and not made, evidently, and the payment that actually is made. David Pecker, as we know, is close to Donald Trump. What were the conversations around that? Was there some sort of quid pro quo? Might there have been a campaign finance violation in that and in other cases that Michael Cohen may be in possession of evidence? Right.
Was this a conversation, and again, some of this is speculative, but was this a conversation where the then candidate, Republican nominee Donald Trump, discusses this with Michael Cohen, and he says, according to Rudy Giuliani, we don't have the recording. Rudy Giuliani can say whatever he wants right now because the recording is not in the public domain. But he says, candidate Trump said, if you're going to make this payment, do it by check, not cash, which I guess makes it less dirty? less whatever, we'll have the conversation. But then did the AMI payment, did they find another route? Did they find another route to have it done through the National Enquirer, which then killed the story? As everyone wants to jump in, I just want to say this. MJ made a great point at the beginning, and I want to amplify it, that this calls into question everything that has been said on these issues about when he knew about it, did these relationships happen, not only from the President of the United States, but all of those who speak for the President. Here's the President, when Michael Cohen first fell into legal jeopardy, here's the President talking on Fox News.
How much of your legal work was handled by Michael Cohen?
Well, as a percentage of my overall legal work, a tiny, tiny little fraction. But Michael would represent me and represent me on some things. He represents me, like with this crazy Stormy Daniels deal. He represented me, and you know, from what I see, he did absolutely nothing wrong. There were no campaign funds going into this.
Then why is he pleading the Fifth?
Which would have been a problem. Because he's got other things. He's got businesses. And from what I understand, they're looking at his businesses. And I hope he's in great shape. Yeah. But he's got businesses, and his lawyers probably told him to do that. But I'm not involved, and I'm not involved. And I've been told I'm not involved.
I've been told. Can I just point out just one very ironic thing right now? You know, we've been talking so much over the last couple of weeks about the question of whether Michael Cohen is going to flip or not against the president. It turns out the reality is that he doesn't need to flip. The damage probably is already done because the FBI has taken so many things that belong to Michael Cohen, including these recordings. You know, the fact that Michael Cohen had this weird voyeuristic habit of secretly recording phone conversations, including apparently with his former boss, means that they have their hands on so many things that they may not ultimately even need to say, we're going to strike a deal with you. If you give us X, Y, and Z information, then we can lessen your charges. And this is just as an example, since he has not been charged yet. I'm just saying that that may not ever come to fruition because of how much information investigators already have.
To that point, my question is it a voyeuristic habit on Michael Cohen's part, or is it proof that he knows he can't trust certain people, including potentially his boss, Donald Trump? So you want the recording because you're not sure if this comes out and if this becomes a problem, that the guy on the other end of the phone, in this case, the Republican nominee at the time, now the President of the United States, is going to come anywhere close to the truth when he's forced to talk about it.
Well, and the point of this is the prosecutors are looking into whether Michael Cohen sought to tamp down these embarrassing stories and whether that violated campaign finance laws and if the president was aware of it, all of that. This quote from Rudy Giuliani makes it sound like the president gave the go-ahead to make this payment. He's saying how to make the payment. He's not saying don't pay, don't make it, don't do this. He's saying how to make the payment. So we don't know why the payment wasn't made, but what we do know from what Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, is saying is that the president essentially gave the go-ahead for this payment to be made. That is essentially what the prosecutors have been looking at while they're investigating Michael Cohen, the president's involvement in all of this. And if he's giving the go-ahead to Michael Cohen to make this payment to a woman to silence her ahead of the election, that is where it's going to be the point of interest for these prosecutors.